Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 10 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. I had a great discussion with Jeanette Koncikowski for this episode. Jeanette is a writer and is a widowed parent, and she is writing the book she wishes she had when her husband died. Jeanette and I had a great discussion on a variety of topics: healing from the traumatic circumstances of her husband's death, moving and buying a home on her own 9 months after her husband died, starting a new relationship after loss and figuring out how to move forward together, moving forward with a new relationship while honoring your late spouse, carving out a role for the step-parent that is not replacing the deceased parent, learning to bear witness to her kid's pain rather than trying to fix it, realizing that having more than one kid means having more than one kind of kid grief, and honoring her late husband's life on his birthday by involving her kids in charity fundraisers. One more thing, Jeanette is still looking to conduct interviews for her book with a few more widowed dads and widowed LGBTQ parents. If that's you and you'd like to help, please head over to the show notes to find out how to get in touch with Jeanette. I hope you enjoy my discussion with Jeanette Koncikowski. My guest today is writer and widowed parent Jeanette Koncikowski, who is joining us from her home in the Buffalo, New York area. Jeanette, welcome.
Thank you.
So Jeanette is the founder of the Widowed Parent Project, and she has decided to write the book that she wishes that she had when her young husband died suddenly in 2014, leaving her and their two young children behind. So Jeanette, before we get more into your work in this area, let's hear more about your story. Because one of the things that I hear from listeners is that it's really helpful to hear how others have navigated all this.
Sure.
So can you just start by setting the stage for us a bit? First, I'd love to hear a little bit about your life before your husband died.
Sure. So my husband and I were 36 when he died, and life just before he died was actually pretty tumultuous for us. Mark was my high school sweetheart. We had been together since we were 15 years old. So for 21 years we were together. We had two little girls who were 5 and 9 at the time. He had just finished his doctorate in 2011 and opened his own chiropractic practice in 2012. So we were really kind of in this exciting place in our careers and in our lives. I had been working for some time in the field of child welfare training, and we loved our little girls and we loved each other, even if it was somewhat imperfect. And, on the outside, everything looked like it was going along pretty well in our lives, but we were going through a really, really difficult time in our private lives. I had suffered a series of losses of people that were close to me, and it really kind of took a toll. We had lost our third pregnancy and our second term in 2010, and kind of just as I was starting to come out of my grief with that, my mother was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer, and I spent another year caring for her until she passed away in 2012. And the same week she died, my husband was diagnosed with epilepsy. So I kind of went right from caregiving for her to caregiving for him. And his seizures were really unpredictable. Sometimes, he would have a couple of weeks where he was fine, and other times he had weeks where he wasn't fine, and he was, kind of constantly, seemingly having seizures. And so all of that kind of started to undo our marriage, and we were really strained, but kind of getting through it. And then my best friend died suddenly of a heart attack at 37. And a few months later, my grandmother died. And so it was just, within a 3-year span, I had lost all of these people I loved. And that took its toll on my own health. And Mark and I kind of became more and more isolated during this time. I think the stress sometimes is just more than we could take. And so there was a period for the year before he died where he gave up his private practice because it was becoming too difficult for him to be there alone with patients. And he had gone to work for another chiropractor, but this person was an hour away, and he had lost his license. So I was driving us back and forth while trying to hold down my job, while trying to take care of 2 kids, and it got to be too much. So we actually separated, and we were apart for the last 9 months of his life. The first 6 months were pretty bad, but kind of by the time and I'm really grateful for this in retrospect, by that summer before he passed away in the fall, we had really kind of come back to a good place together. He was going to counseling. He was taking care of his health. I was in a much better place with some breathing room. We were really working actively on our marriage. We'd started dating again. We were communicating better. I really felt like there was hope that we were going to be able to kind of crawl out of this dark place together and renew. And we were seeing each other about 3 or 4 nights a week. He had moved to an apartment just 2 blocks from our house so that he could still be close to our girls. And of course, once he moved out, I missed him terribly and regretted him moving out and wanted him back. And I was going to actually tell him for that Christmas that I wasn't going to file for the divorce, that I wanted him to come home. I didn't get that chance. He died suddenly the day before Halloween 2014, on October 30th, 2014. And, it was the kind of shock of it still sometimes makes me catch my breath. It was just not something that was supposed to happen. And if I've learned anything from all of this grief, it's that none of it was supposed to happen. And yet all of it happens because we all have to face our own mortality. So it was really, it really put me in a complete kind of transformation in my life to go through all of these losses in such a short period of time. And I want to believe that that was the last loss for a while. Thankfully, I've had a couple of years to recover from it now without any further catastrophes.
Yeah, I'm knocking on wood here.
Yeah, I know. I'm always like, are we done now? God, can we? Have we done enough? So that was kind of what was going on for us before he died.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And so then you mentioned that it was October. Can you just talk a little bit about what happened? Because I think as I recall, you had some additional trauma based on the way everything happened.
Yeah. So the day he died, he was actually supposed to take the girls to school because I had a big presentation. I was in line for a promotion. I was going to give this great presentation. And because we were getting along so well and co-parenting so well, he was like, I'll pick the kids up so you can leave for work early. And he didn't come. And so, I called him. There was no answer. And I got frustrated and went over to the apartment. And I knew pretty quickly when he didn't answer that something had happened. He had had a couple of seizures the night before, and he had come home from work. And I had asked him to come home to our house. And he had told me that he needed to learn to take care of himself, that he was going to manage this without me having to kind of mother him through it. And so, that was hard because I want to believe if, he had come home, something would have changed. But he died of a really kind of mysterious condition in epilepsy called sudden unexplained death in epilepsy. And it's just that it's sudden and they don't understand what happens. It wasn't caused by the seizure. He had had his first grand mal seizure, we found out later. And his brain kind of didn't flip back on like it should have after that. And my kids were with me. So when I got to the apartment, because he never followed through on some of the things he was supposed to do, like make me a key, I couldn't get in. And so we had to have the police break down the door, and it took 90 minutes. And the kids were kind of witness to that. And by the time I found someone to take them, I had asked for them to be taken out, and the person just took them to the apartment underneath. So they had heard everything that happened in that apartment. And we all had a lot of trauma. We had a lot of trauma to process after that. And so I guess the blessing of this happening to us, if there was a blessing in this, it's that I had a background in trauma counseling. This is what I had been doing professionally. And so I knew who to call for help. I think I was much more privileged than most widowed parents in that I had resources. I knew therapists personally that I could call and say, hey, I need to find someone soon to get these kids and I some help. And so I was grateful for that. But it added a whole nother kind of layer to our grief to have to be able to process how we found him. I tried to resuscitate him for 45 minutes. It was a really, really difficult situation to be in and to not have an answer to give my kids. How do you tell them? Nobody understands why this happened, but also the doctors don't understand how he died. And one of the things I was able to do after the fact was be able to contribute to science. Being someone involved in science, I thought Mark would really want me to be able to help understand this mysterious illness. And so pretty quickly after he died, I was contacted by our coroner's office because she had just gone through a training about SUDEP, sudden unexplained death in epilepsy. And she reached out to say there was a national registry and would I like him to be a part of that and contribute to the research, which was very time sensitive. So within 48 hours of his death, we were able to do that and to help hopefully other people by donating some of his tissue and by providing access to all of his records like I did. Hopefully they'll be able to help determine what causes this type of death. So I've been also grateful to the researchers at NYU Langone Medical Center at the North American SUDEP Registry, because they really helped me get some answers, as much as one can, for a mysterious type of death, to be able to have some ideas at least about the current theories and hypothesis of how this particular type of death occurs.
Okay. So what were those early months then like as a widowed parent in particular, and helping the kids and yourself as a family unit adjust? What was that early experience like for you?
It was, we spent a lot of time in therapy. I had, because of my background in trauma counseling, known that it was really important that we all have people to talk to, both kind of together and individually. And, the adage, of course, is that not everybody needs counseling, but I felt strongly, given what we had witnessed that morning and given their ages and given, the fact that we had been separated, there was kind of a lot of additional emotion, guilt and shame and blame and, why me, which I think is there for everyone that has an unexpected or even an anticipated loss at this age. So we spent a lot of time in therapy. I mean, we were going, each of them was seeing a counselor once a week. I was seeing a counselor once a week. We found a support group for families that had just gone through a loss. And so we did the support group together. So we spent a lot of time just getting help. 2 weeks after my husband died, we were snowed in our house for 5 days because of Buffalo. So there was this terrible November blizzard that Buffalo experienced, and we were trapped in the house for 5 days. We couldn't get out of our house. This was just 2 weeks after he died. There were a couple of deaths that had occurred because of the storm, and my garage roof collapsed during the storm. I was really kind of feeling so overwhelmed and so much like, I guess, abandoned in some ways by God, and feeling like, how could this just keep getting worse? And so it was really, though, during that storm where I made a decision that if the only way we were kind of going to come out of this was that I was going to have to take the reins. I was going to have to step up and kind of figure out how to help myself so that I could help the kids, and I could figure out how we could continue to have a really good life. I think, I made self-care a priority. I knew I couldn't pull my kids through it if I wasn't okay. After the storm, one of the things I did was to go look for a book to help me. There were no books, which is how I ended up starting Widowed Parent Project. But, I wanted somebody to tell me how to do this, because I didn't know how. And I felt like I should know how, having had this background in crisis counseling. But there wasn't a lot of support out there for being a widowed parent, especially, just in terms of like, how do you help yourself while you have two grieving children? How do you help your grieving children when you're immersed in your own grief? And so really, I just kind of started turning towards the professional support we had in our life to help with that. And then I also, found other ways and other outlets for myself. I took people up on the offer to babysit. And so every Saturday I made it Self-Care Saturday, and I spent a couple hours to myself. I started boxing. I was horseback riding. Sometimes I would just go to the library and read. Sometimes I would just, take the kids out of the house and sit in the house and cry. It was just some time I needed to myself to have some breathing room and be able to figure out what I wanted to do now. And I really think that first year, those Saturdays were invaluable to me in kind of surviving that time.
Yeah. And can you remind me, how old were the kids then?
My girls were 5 and 9.
5 and 9. Okay. And now they're how old?
They are now 9. The youngest one is now 9, and my oldest is 13.
13 and 9. Okay. All right. So what do you think was the turning point for you as a widowed parent and a widowed family? Like, when did you know that you guys would be okay? Not that everything was fixed. Obviously, things can't be fixed. But, did you feel any kind of a shift at some point?
I did. Right after the November storm, I decided to sell the house. I had a really big, old, rambling 3-story house, and I knew I could not take care of it myself. So I didn't listen to everyone that told me, don't make decisions for the first 2 years. I just said, I can't do this, and I know this, and I got to get out of this house, because especially I think because we were separated, the idea of having to bring home half of our furniture back to this house and not bring him home. I knew immediately I needed to start over. I needed a fresh start. So as soon as the snow melted the following spring, I put the house on the market. I found us a lovely little house in a village nearby. So we got out of our immediate area, so we didn't have to drive by the apartment and do things like that. It meant changing the kids' schools, which I knew was another risk for them, to kind of disrupt them further. But I really felt strongly that all of us just needed some space from what had happened, in our neighborhood and with this loss. And so we moved 9 months after he died. And it was about another 9 months later, so about 18 months after he died, that I kind of felt like we were going to be okay. Once they started settling into their new school, the blessing of the new house was that we were on a street where there were lots of other kids. And the house I had before, we were on a really busy street, so they couldn't run through the neighborhood and go to backyards and, be with other kids and community. And the new house allowed them that. And that was the best thing, was just getting to a chance for them to be kids and to play with other kids. And I really think that was the best therapy. So it was about 18 months after he died. And I think in that sense, it was about a period of time where I knew we were going to be okay. The new house for me, because I had never really lived on my own. Mark and I had, gone from kind of growing up together to moving in together to having our family home. This was really important for me to kind of have something that was just mine, and to be able to buy that house myself, and to be able to, kind of exhale for the first time. And so I really credit that little house with helping me start over and find my footing. I think at a deeper level, it's really only just been in the last year that I've started feeling like it really is going to be good and okay again. I met a man in a meetup group for widow and widowers, and I've been in a relationship with him now for over 3 years, almost 4. And I think it's just been as we've been kind of starting our life here together. We bought a new house together recently, that I've been able to kind of work through a lot of my fears about getting married again, about trusting someone not to leave me. Because I think when you go through a loss like that, even though it's irrational to be angry at your deceased partner, that was part of it. And I had to kind of face what it meant to feel abandoned, and to be able to trust again that probably isn't going to happen again. But if it did, I would know how to handle it. I think, I'm trusting now that as my new partner and I are kind of building our life together, that things are going to be okay. And that's not because I have a new partner. It's not like I needed, a man to show me like life is going to be good again. I've got this other person in my life. It's really been about kind of how our relationship is different and changed than the one I had in my marriage. How I've changed, and being able to see that I've grown a lot. I don't push my negative feelings down anymore until they explode. I have stronger boundaries. It's really been about trusting my new partner to know that, he's going to be there, and we're going to kind of work through anything together. I think that is what's really helped me kind of come to terms with knowing that life is going to be good going forward, that we are able to move forward together. That's really helped me focus on the deepest fears I had about my loss, and about commitment, and belief that if I showed him who I really was, all my good and my bad, somehow that mean I'd lose him too. And the fact that we're kind of building a new life together has helped me have a much deeper sense of trust in the universe, in God, and myself and my kids. Like knowing that I can trust people again, I guess, is how I know I've healed.
I was thinking of asking how you knew you were ready to date again, but then it occurred to me, you mentioned you met him in a widows group.
So
maybe you did decide to date. Maybe it just happened. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it just kind of happened. Certainly, it's like was not looking for love at that time in my life. So yeah, I guess it was. I mean, there was a decision, I suppose, at some point that like I wanted to pursue this. I think it was very much a fear that we both met in this place we never expected to meet. I was with someone this morning and they said, "Oh, how did you and your partner meet?" And I was like, "Well, it's actually a pretty sad story. It's we met in a support group for people that were widowed." So it was not like I was looking for love, but I guess that's I kind of frame it as the sunlight in my darkness. Him coming into my life at that point in time and me into his was really just this bit of ray of sunshine and hope. And I think both of us felt like we weren't allowed to have that because we were still pretty fresh into our loss and our grief. And it was within the first year after losing our spouses. And we just, kind of kept telling ourselves like, we shouldn't be happy. We shouldn't be allowed to feel this way about someone new so soon. But I think also we recognized that we could be there for each other, and we were kind of going through this process in a similar spot. We were the only two people in the group in our 30s, so it was kind of just a natural gravitation towards each other and a friendship that eventually evolved into something more. I think there was a decision of like, do I want to turn this into a relationship, and what would that be like? And when we went on our first date, I don't think either one of us knew it was a first date. We were very unsure of ourselves. And then pretty quickly realized, yes, I guess it is a first date, and maybe we would like to do this again. So, it was really this, I was going through this great loss, and all of these losses I was still processing. And then here in the middle of that, I fell in love with someone, and I felt like I didn't get to be happy. And really for the first year of this relationship, I think I struggled with feeling like I didn't deserve to be happy after going through so much loss, and and what would people think? And it was my dad actually, who was widowed 2 years earlier than I was, who said, "Look, if you have a chance to be happy, why would you deny yourself that? Like, go be happy, and who cares what other people think?" And so I kind of clung to that and decided that if this was going to be a thing, then it was going to be a thing. And I guess we'll see where it goes. And I'm really glad I did.
Do you think the fact that he also is widowed, I suppose that might make some things easier, some things harder? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think it absolutely made it easier in the sense that there was room for my grief and his grief. And there was never an expectation that I couldn't talk about Mark, that I couldn't miss Mark, that I couldn't tell him what I was going through, just the same way he could with his wife. And so, because his wife had died 2 months before my husband, we were very close in time. When we went to the meetup group, it was both of our first times. We were kind of like the new people. We were very close in terms of being able to explore together like what this meant. Even though we had just met, we kind of turned to each other for support that way. I don't know that if I had been dating someone a couple of years out that was divorced, that they or maybe had never been married, that they would be able to understand what this was like. So I was really grateful, and having met B at the time I did, because it gave us a chance to kind of honor each other's grief. But there were definitely challenges. In the beginning especially, it felt like there were 4 people in our relationship and 2 of them weren't living anymore. And we had to figure out kind of, what did it mean for us to partner while we were really coping with these losses. And he was a newlywed. Him and his wife had only been married about 3 years when she died. And so, and compared to my 12 years and 21 years together, we had very different types of marriages. And so working together through like what it meant to lose each of them and to be respectful of each other's need for space and to have our own ways of grieving. I think he grieved in a very different way in some ways than I did, but we've been trying to kind of honor who our spouses were and bring their spirits into our new family without ever making the other one feel like they didn't have a place here. And also recognizing, especially as we've moved into our new house together, that like we have to be able to move forward into our relationship, and we want to honor our first spouses while also looking at creating a life together.
And did he and his wife have kids? Was he also a parent coming into this relationship?
They did not. So he really wanted to be a dad and didn't get that chance. And he has been amazing at stepping in and kind of filling these really big shoes that my kid's dad left. And, that's been a little bit challenging too. It's like he's been very respectful of not wanting to take Mark's place and, being clear with my girls that he's not there to be their dad, but that he can be something to them and he can help them and he can love them and help them grow. And since moving in together 6 months ago, we're very much in a place where he is co-parenting 100% of the time, and he's awesome at it. And I'm really grateful to be able to trust that, someone is going to pick up my kids after school and he's going to be there for all of the school concerts. And he really has stepped in to kind of father them even without being their dad. And I've been super, super grateful to him for that. And he loves it. It's, it wasn't a hard stretch. They're really cool kids. And he's really enjoyed kind of, having more and more of a role in their life as our relationship has grown.
That's great. Something you said was interesting to me about carving out a role for him that's not a replacement for their dad, but that its own special relationship. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how to communicate that message to kids. Like how, it seems like, do you just say, I'm not your dad, so we're good now? Or like,
I think with anything you're communicating to kids during grief, it's conversations that have to happen over and over again. And so as we kind of settled into this relationship and it became clear to my kids that, he wasn't going to go anywhere and that he was going to be a part of my life and then their life as an extension, it started with us just involving the kids more, doing more family activities together, taking a family vacation together. I have a really open and honest relationship with my kids. I'm very clear that this is my relationship. I don't need their permission, but also I want their input and I value their feedback. And I want them to feel like if something is ever uncomfortable for them, they can come to me and share that. And so we've talked quite a bit about, his changing role in their lives and what that looks like. There was a conversation that's happened more than once where he said, I'm not trying to be your dad. I'm never going to be your dad. But what I'd like to do is be another adult in your life that loves you and wants to help you and take care of you, just like a lot of our other family members do. And I think, him kind of acknowledging that he wasn't trying to take over has helped. We kind of very early on decided as he moved in with us that I would, be the disciplinarian still. Like I'm still kind of the lead parent. I call the shots with the kids, but I've also been clear with them that just like I would expect them to respect any other adult that was kind of watching them when I'm away, they need to give him that same level of respect. And so, if there is an issue that the three of them have, I hear about it and I help mediate it. But I think as he's grown in confidence about his parenting skills, he didn't have the privilege of attaching to these kids as little kids. He stepped in when they were 5 and 9 and grief stricken. And so for him to kind of figure out, what is his role it's not been easy, but he's been great about kind of taking cues from me. And when there's been issues, we've gone back to the therapist for help in figuring out, how do we navigate this? And the kids, and we've let the kids kind of take the lead. We took our relationship really, really slow, knowing that it was going to be difficult for them to see me with someone else. I think even though Mark and I had separated before he died, there was still very much a feeling with both of my kids that well, you can date someone else, but you can't marry someone else. You can only be married to daddy. And as B and I have started talking about, solidifying our relationship through marriage, I think that's shifted for the kids, and they can see that it's okay for me to be married again and okay to have a stepdad. I think it's just because we've taken it so slow and we've been so honest and open and asking them questions instead of telling them, we're going to get married and you're going to have a stepdad. It's been, what do you think about this? And I've trusted that even though I'm not asking their permission, that letting them have that kind of level of input has been really helpful in them being able to process this changing relationship. And I'm thrilled that they are in such a good place with us. And really, I wanted to see how living together went before we got married, because I know it's been a lot. It's been a lot on my kids, but it's gone amazingly well. And so we're all really excited, I think, for the next step together.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear. What do you think has been the hardest part of all that, of bringing him into your life and into your family? And I guess maybe it's a two-part question. What do you think has been the hardest part? And do you have any idea what he might say has been the hardest part?
That's a great question. I think the hardest part for me has been learning to bear witness to my kids' pain and not fix it necessarily.
Yes.
I'm very solution oriented. I want to fix everything. I wanted to fix their grief, and you can't. That was this parenting lesson: is I can't fix this. I can only witness their process. And that's been really probably the most difficult thing for me. I wanted to just make it better, and I couldn't make it better. There's no making better the loss of their dad. There is us only kind of learning how to cope with it together. And so, there were things where I had to kind of step back and just be okay with them not being okay. And I think that was the hardest part for me, was just saying, I can't change it. I can get them support. I can get them resources, but they have got to go through this process on their own. And that was both kind of generally with their grief, and then in relationship to bringing my new guy into their life and how they were going to kind of acclimate to him. It was really just trusting that they could figure this out and that they would be okay. I think for him, the challenge has been, learning to parent kids that aren't his own, and kids that were grieving, and kids that he didn't have a history with. That's asking a lot of a person to kind of come in. And it, as I said, it's unfolded over the last 3 years. So it's not like it was just dumped on him as, the beginning of our relationship. But as our relationship has been deepening the last 2 years in particular, trying for him to figure out, how can he build a bond with each of my girls? How can he find fun things to do with them that are maybe outside of my involvement? And luckily, my little one loves Star Wars. He's a big Star Wars geek, so they had an immediate kind of bond. I think it's been a little bit tougher for him with my older girl to find things that they enjoy doing together, but they found that. And then the hard part for me was trusting someone else with my kids. It's like there was a very conscious decision one day when my little one was sick and I had to stay home with her, and we had tickets to a sporting event. And I was like, can I let my boyfriend take my other daughter without me? How's that going to go? And I had to trust that, if this is someone I really want in my life and their life, then we have to see how he does on his own. And he did great, and so it's kind of just been, like I said in the beginning, a very big lesson in trust for me, and knowing to trust my own instincts. I think is a huge piece of that.
Yeah. Okay. This is reminding me of a discussion I had recently with a step parent in a widowed family, and about, thinking about some of the challenges of bonding with the kids as they're older when you step in. And so I like, your ideas of finding things that maybe they can connect around, whether it's Star Wars or whether it's whatever, but really trying to proactively seek out those things, maybe even based on the kid's interest, even if the parent isn't or if the adult isn't naturally interested in
finding things that they're interested in. I think one of the turning points for us, actually, my little one in the very beginning was somewhat resistant to me having a new person in my life. And it wasn't until he had invited us to his house, and they saw the pictures of him and his wife everywhere, where she was like, oh, he misses someone too. He's gone through a loss too. And it really dramatically flipped from like her being somewhat resistant to him to like, well, we have to take care of him because he's grieving too. And then we figured that out at like 6 or 7 years old. And that was really a turning point. And he's been great about, we go to the cemetery sometimes as a family with him or his wife. He's come to the cemetery with us. He's been supportive of my kids when they've been grieving. I think for them to see that he's honoring their grief and experiencing his own grief, and we all can take care of each other in that it's not any kind of competition. We're not isolating anyone through that there is room, just like there's room in our hearts for all this love. There's room in our hearts to let everyone grieve in the way they need to, and to kind of support each other through that. And I think that's been huge for the kids to be able to see that he's honoring their relationship with their dad. And he's doing it in a way that is on their timeline. It was really just this past year where they invited him to be part of kind of the way that we honor my husband on the anniversary of his death every year. And the kids were like, well, of course he's coming this year. And I was like, okay then. Would you like to join us this year? So really it has been letting them take the lead, but also his incredible patience to let them find their footing with him and not force himself into their lives just because he's been in my life.
Right. Okay. So looking back, I guess, over the last few years here, what do you wish you'd known if you could turn back the clock, right? What do you wish you'd known 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
I think the first thing was a belief that I could get through this. I think early on, someone reminded me that the people I lost and loved aren't totally gone from my life, that I can call on them when I need to. And that was huge for me. I guess I had really, before all this loss, not been a particularly spiritual person, and being able to trust that there is something else greater than myself out there, that someday I will see my loved ones again. That was really something I wish I had believed at the start. I found that to really be true. I talk to my husband now all the time, even if it's a one-sided conversation. I can feel his love now more than I ever did. I wish I could have believed in those early days after his death that his death didn't mean the absence of his love. I just have to search a little harder for that connection there now and look a little bit deeper within. And that's really been the thing that's given me strength when I felt like I couldn't go on. I guess in terms of parenting, I also wish I had known that having more than one kid means more than one kind of kid grief.
That's an interesting...
figuring out how to deal with two very different kids and very different styles of grief has been hard. I very much recall one day when I had one kid kind of melting down about something, and her sister was melting down about the same thing, but in the completely opposite way. And the solution would have put them at odds. And it was just like, how do you navigate these two kids that are different ages, different personalities, and are missing their dad in different ways?
Right.
And I think, that's really where counseling also helped us. I was able to find each of them a counselor that really suited their personalities. And they were very different, and they got very different kinds of counseling, but it worked for them. And I think that gave me a little bit of space because I didn't have to be the only person handling their grief. I trusted that the counselors could hold some of this for us. And that gave me a little bit of permission to take a step back and be like, I don't have to fix it. There are people that can help us to get through this. And, that helped. In the very beginning, I felt like it felt insurmountable. Like I was going to have to do all of this on my own, but I was completely alone with these kids. And what am I going to do now?
So how do you find a counselor who's a good match for a kid? I mean, let's say a parent is saying, I need counselors, but what do I do? Right. And also it always seems to me like, you don't know if somebody's a good fit until you're some amount down the road of talking and sharing your story. And then the idea of restarting is like overwhelming, right?
It is. And it's, we're lucky that the people I found, because I had known of them for my professional work, were people that I knew pretty quickly I think were going to be good fits for the kids. But most parents wouldn't have access to that kind of information. And I think, what I tell parents in my group all the time is if it doesn't feel right after 3 or 4 sessions, even though it's hard to start over, go find somebody else, because that relationship with a therapist is going to be the thing more than any type of therapy. What all the research shows is that it's your relationship with the therapist that's most meaningful to someone feeling like they can move forward and recover. And so you have to find the right person. And that can be hard, especially when you're dealing with insurances and managed care, and there's not a lot of people. I live in a fairly big city. There's not a lot of people with experience in grief counseling, let alone traumatic grief. And so it was really doing a lot of that research for myself. And that's what I'm hoping the book can help people with. It's kind of giving you some really practical ideas about where to get help, what kind of help to look for, and making sure that you can find what you need.
Okay. And I guess the other thing I'm thinking about, your kids were quite young. Is it challenging at all to help kids understand like what therapy is all about? I mean, I know if they're super young, they can do things like art therapy or play therapy. Yeah. And I know if they're old enough, they can just talk to somebody and get benefit out of that. But it seems like there's a middle ground where maybe it's kind of hard for the kids to get what therapy is all about.
Yeah, I think that's true. My youngest one, when she had actually started counseling when she was 4, when we separated, because she was having a tough time with that, and had only gone to 1 or 2 sessions when he died. And so I remember going back to the therapist being like, well, I know you thought this was going to be this. Turns out I need to know if you are capable of handling all of this now, because this is what's happened since we were here 2 weeks ago. And they did a lot of play therapy. So it didn't even necessarily feel like therapy to my 5-year-old at the time. Okay. I don't think she framed it that way. But she did know as she kind of went through the next 2 years of going on and off, that it was counseling, and that the goal with the counseling was to help her feel better and to be able to talk about her dad and be able to talk about what she needed. And we kind of kept it as basic as that. Doctor is going to be here to help you, and you're going to talk to her when you're ready, or you can draw pictures, or you can have fun. But we're going to have this space and this time to talk about daddy. And if you don't want to talk about it outside of this is okay. But we're going to come to this room on this day, and this is what we're going to do. And just being that concrete with a little kid, I think helps frame. With my older daughter, she was 9 when she started counseling, and went for about a year. And then there was about a year break. And then we went back again for a little bit when some new issues came up. And she's thriving now. And I really credit for both of them getting that help early on and making a huge difference to their ability to kind of cope with everything that life has thrown at them. With her, I could be a little bit more clear about, this is kind of the goal of therapy. It's to help you process what happened. And we spent a lot of time, her and I, with the therapist, talking about words like trauma and resiliency and loss and grief. Because kids hear these things, right? They don't know what bereavement is. They don't know what grief is. But when you can do a project, as we did in the support group we were in, when you define grief and you talk about how it feels and everything you've lost, they really did have some great adults working with them that did art projects and did play therapy and really helped make it very child-centered. And I think that's my recommendation over and over again to parents is find good counselors, but also find people that know how to work with kids. You have to find someone that specializes in working with kids, even if they're not necessarily a grief specialist, because you need to be able to reach kids where they are. Right.
Okay. I know we're actually approaching the end of our time here. I do have a couple more questions. Just changing gears here, because I read, maybe it was on Twitter or something. I think you do something unique for his birthday every year to remember. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So my husband died in October and his birthday was in February, and birthdays in our house were always a big deal, even though he hated his birthday, but the kids always wanted to make it a birthday. And of course they were like, well, we have to do something for daddy's birthday. And I was still in a pretty dark place that first year, and kind of in my own depression, was like, what? I don't even want to acknowledge this day. But I also felt like it needed to be a celebration of his life for them. And so I was trying to figure out what could we do that would be a balance. They wanted cake and they wanted candles, and I knew I couldn't survive that particular year. So what we decided to do was to do some something to honor his life and the things he loved. So we started a GoFundMe, and we raised $4,000 on his birthday week, the first year,
that's
as
awesome.
a memorial scholarship. Mark and I had worked at a children's camp when we were in college. That was really meaningful to both of us. And so we raised enough money to send 10 kids to camp tuition free the first year.
Nice.
And so we were able to make that donation to the camp and just ask them to quietly cover the tuition of 10 kids and 10 families that needed it. And the second year, because he loved playing guitar, we found a local not-for-profit called Music is Art, and they had a guitar program. So we were able to raise funding to give 3 or 4 kids new guitars that otherwise families couldn't have afforded them. We've also done, this past year, we helped fund a seizure support dog for a child who had epilepsy, and it was something that I thought, he would have wanted to be able to help other people. So we've used kind of this birthday scholarship. We always give to a different charity every year, but the idea is to do something that was about his life instead of about his death, and be able to kind of pay for the things that Mark loved in life. And we've been really excited to be able to do that each year, and very grateful to our friends and family that helped support that effort.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you find that the kid, what am I trying to say? Do you find that as they get older that they get, involved and enthused in the planning and,
they did right from the beginning. I mean, I think that was the best one really was that first year, because they kept coming over to the computer and hitting refresh and watching the money go up. And because my oldest, because both of them had kind of spent their summers visiting this camp, camp was very close to all of our hearts. So they knew the tangible benefit that other kids would get from going to this camp. And so it really gave them something to focus on that day that was exciting and positive, and look what we're doing in Daddy's name.
Yeah.
And even in the last few years, I have really, really smart, kind, cool kids, and they've been involved with other types of philanthropy, especially my oldest daughter, who's been raising funds every year in a lemonade stand for the local NICU where she was a preemie. So this was just kind of seen for them as an extension of how we do our charitable giving every year. But they really still get very excited, and we always plan it at least a month in advance. We pick the charity and we contact them. And with the advent now with more social media, we oftentimes will get the charity to share the campaign. I think the thing that's been most meaningful is people that didn't even know my husband that have given significant amounts of money because they heard our story and they were so touched. We had the first year, we had a couple in another state, and the husband was in hospice, and the wife had seen this on Facebook from a friend of ours. And she told the husband, and they had worked at a summer camp when they were young, and they were so moved by our story that they gave very generously. And it really was just those kinds of stories for the kids to have and know that their dad is still making a difference, even after he's gone. I think has been huge for them, and being a way they can remember him each year and honor him on his birthday.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. We should talk more about this sometime.
Absolutely.
Just one last question actually here today, because I know we're just about to the end. If you could say one thing to newly widowed parents, what would it be?
I think it really is about trusting yourself, trusting your kids. Absolutely get professional help, get community around you. I'm a big believer that you got to let go of all the BS in your life. If there are things that feel toxic, that are super stressful, that are holding you back, once you're a widowed parent, you don't have time for that. Whittle down your life to the most essential components if you can, and insulate yourself in a way that prioritizes your time, prioritizes your healing. I think those are the things that I've taken most away from this. And sometimes that means other losses are going to happen, whether that's you change jobs or you have to move or you might lose friends, but really putting yourself and your family first until you can feel like you're back on better footing. Be authentic and be kind to yourself. Give yourself a lot of grace. That's the word that keeps coming up over and over again as I've been doing my interviews with widowed parents and clinicians, is to give yourself some grace.
Mm-hmm. Oh, pardon me. That reminds me, we actually didn't talk about your book and your project. If you have a couple more minutes here,
Yeah.
could you tell us a little bit about what you're working
Sure.
on and how, listeners might be able to help?
Sure. So when I couldn't find the book I wanted to tell me how to do this, I decided that there must be some reason. I have a background in trauma counseling and writing, and now I've gone through this. So I decided to write that book. Because I'm a widowed parent with very little free time. It's taking me a lot longer than I wanted it to. But to date, I've interviewed about 25 other widowed parents. I've kind of been collecting their stories. That led to me starting the Widowed Parent Project, which has really just kind of been a way for me to share resources online. I don't have a website yet, but you can find us on Facebook if you are a widowed parent with young kids in the home under 18 and you'd like to join us. You can search out Widowed Parent Project in your Facebook search bar and ask to join our closed group. I've got about 80 some widowed parents from all over the US that kind of connect there to share stories and support. You can also find me tweeting at WidowedPP, the Widowed Parent Project. I have also been really excited to be involved as a consultant with the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. If you go to their website, www.nctsn.org, you will find a brand new research that's just been released in November. It's called The Power of Parenting. It's a 4-page handout that has lots of practical tips and advice and scenarios from other widowed parents and other caregivers talking about raising grieving children. And that I've been thrilled to be a part of that work group and be able to put this out nationally. So that's kind of where you can find me. Keep an eye out for my book. Hopefully sometime in 2020 it will get published. But I've been really grateful to be able to find other widowed parents to connect with. I am done mostly with my interviews at this point, but there are 2 groups that I am still particularly interested in hearing from. I'm looking to have more dads participate in the book. So if you're listening to this and you're a widowed dad and you'd like to share your story of your family, I'd love to connect with you. You can email me at widowedparentproject@gmail.com or join the Facebook group and message me that way. I'm also really interested in including the experiences of LGBTQ widowed parents, and if they would like to share their family stories, they can also reach out. Otherwise, I am trying to wrap up my interviews. I've got months and months ahead of transcribing interviews in front of me, and then I'm hoping to kind of compile all that into the book so that it's really a handbook for navigating those first couple of years post-loss and how you can take care of yourself and take care of your kids and rebuild your life and move forward. All the while honoring your loved one.
Fantastic. Okay. And I'll be sure to put in the show notes all the links that you mentioned and the handout for the National Child Traumatic Stress Network and the link to your group and the other resources that you mentioned. I think those will be really fantastic to share with people. I know I've seen that handout and I think it's great. So
yeah, we were really excited about that. We're actually going to be doing a series. That was our first one, which was kind of just a general resource, but we're going to be working as a group on some other materials for parents where there's been suicide, where there's been homicide, different developmental ages of kids, things like that. So I'm excited to kind of see where that work is going to go.
Great. Yeah, no, that's great because I know there's so many different nuances of the needs depending on all those factors you just mentioned.
Yeah, it was like one handout really couldn't get all of it, but we wanted to have a starting place of some basic tips and suggestions, and then we're going to kind of go from there with it.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a great place to end. My guest today is writer and widowed parent Jeanette Koncikowski, founder of the Widowed Parent Project. And Jeanette, thanks so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you for doing this.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jeanette Koncikowski as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 10. And if you're finding this podcast interesting, you can help other widowed parents find it by sharing episodes on your favorite social media channels or in your favorite widow groups. Plus, I'm still taking questions from listeners. Find the one question survey asking what is your biggest challenge as a widowed parent at widowedparentpodcast.com. I read every response and use them to help pick show topics and guests, so please take a moment to write in today. And one more thing, if you've been widowed by cancer, please do jump over to takeactionagainstcancer.org and find out how you and your family can get involved for World Cancer Day, which is coming up on February 4th. And hey, thanks for listening. Until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.